The text came through when I least expected it. We were sitting in the dimly lit school auditorium, listening to the college counselor walk us through scholarship deadlines and financial aid forms. Everyone around me was buzzing with nerves and excitement, jotting notes about deadlines and essays. My phone, buried in my bag, vibrated sharply against the hard plastic of the seat. At first, I thought it was just another reminder. But when I glanced at the screen, a single line sliced open my stomach. Alert. Withdrawal of $12,000 from Education Savings Act. I froze. My chest tightened. That account, that money, was all I had been told I could count on for the past 4 years. Every babysitting job I worked, every birthday check from relatives, every bit of financial security supposedly set aside for me to get into college. Gone with a single notification. My hand clenched around my phone so hard it shook. Sitting 2 rows behind me, my mother's long-term partner, Mark, gave me a little nod as if to say, "Don't worry, I've got this handled." He wanted all the teachers and parents here to see him as the reliable guardian, the man who had stepped up when my dad bailed out of the picture. And here I was, staring straight at proof that he had gutted my future, while smiling like the perfect family man in front of the entire PTA. The counselor's voice blurred in my ears. My heart pounded so loudly I was embarrassed people might hear it. My fingers hovered over my mom's contact, ready to forward her the screenshot, but some instinct stopped me. If I sent it now, if she confronted Mark in public, he'd only double down. That's what he did best. Turn evidence into misunderstandings, twist concern into overreaction. But the money. My money. $12,000. I could practically feel it slipping out of my grasp forever. And I had no idea if there was more missing than just that. By the time the lights came up and parents shuffled papers back into folders, Mark slid up beside me and placed a hand between my shoulder blades. Cheerful, like nothing had happened. "Got everything you need for applications, champ?" I stared at him, my throat burning. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say out loud, "Where's my money?" But everyone was still crowded around, thanking the counselor, chatting about SAT scores. His hand pressed just slightly, guiding me forward, like he was steering me, like he always was. I swallowed hard and forced a half smile. Yeah, I think so. But inside, I knew something had just shifted forever. That text wasn't just an alert. It was a warning shot telling me my future was officially under siege. And if I didn't figure out what he was doing, I might lose far more than a college fund. I didn't know then that the withdrawal was only the tip of the iceberg. Shall I write the next chapter? Walking out of the auditorium, my legs felt like they were carrying someone else's body. The bank alert wouldn't stop flashing in my head. $12,000 gone. I could practically see the number burned onto the back of my eyelids. Mark was still beside me, joking with other parents, tossing his practiced laughs into their conversations, while I stayed silent, every nerve buzzing. It wasn't supposed to be like this. That college fund was my tether, my safety net. For years, my mom had reassured me with the same words. "Don't worry, Mark's got it all set aside. You'll be the first in the family to go straight into university without debt." Every time I swallowed my pride and accepted fewer shifts at work or didn't push for extra tutoring we couldn't afford, it was because I believed that fund was waiting. I thought I could trust him because she trusted him. I couldn't just walk away from him and handle my future alone. Not yet. Nearly all my university forms listed him as my secondary guardian for financial purposes. Receipts, tax letters, FAFSA paperwork, everything ran through the same channel he controlled. Even the counselor tonight had directed questions to him instead of me. And I had kept quiet, afraid of being seen as petty or ungrateful. The stakes weren't as simple as, he took my money. If Mark was capable of draining the account, then my whole next year, applications, housing deposits, even the chance of leaving this town, was under his thumb. I saw too many doors slamming before they ever opened. But here's the part I haven't told anyone until now. I wasn't just worried about college. I was terrified of breaking my mother's illusion. She wanted so badly to believe she had chosen a man who could step in where my dad had failed. If that illusion cracked, if I shattered it with ugly truths, I feared she'd look at me like the traitor instead of him. As we walked toward the car, my pulse quickened every time I imagined her reaction. Would she believe me if I showed her the alert? Or would she take his side and accuse me of sabotaging her relationship? Mark jingled the car keys casually in his hand. "You look tense in there," he said, his voice carrying that conversational smile. "Don't worry, college stuff is stressful. That's why you've got me in your corner." I could hardly breathe. In my corner? He was in my account, and if he could reach that deep and not flinch, what else had he already taken without me noticing? Those questions spiraled all the way home. The problem wasn't just fixing this violation. It was how to fight when the person you needed to fight was the same one holding every piece of paper that said you belonged in the future you've been working for. And yet, if you think losing $12,000 was the worst part, wait until you hear how he made me doubt my own memory the very next night. Shall I write the next chapter? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words on my phone screen. Withdrawal $12,000. It wasn't just numbers. It was dorm rooms I might never see, textbooks I might not be able to afford, a future slipping grain by grain out of my hands. By the time I heard Mark's footsteps in the hallway, my resolve was already there. I had to confront him. My mom had gone to bed early with a headache, the TV in her room humming faintly. He was in the kitchen, fixing himself a mug of tea, like nothing in the world was wrong. I walked in, my phone clutched so tight my knuckles were white. "What happened to the college account?" My voice came out sharper than I expected, trembling between fear and fury. Mark didn't flinch. He glanced at me, raised one eyebrow, and sighed like he'd been waiting for this. "The account?" he repeated. "You mean the money? Don't look so dramatic, kiddo. I just moved some things around. You must be misremembering the balance." For a beat, I just stared at him. Misremembering? It was printed right there in black and white. "No," I said, my words shaking. "I got a bank alert. You took $12,000. He leaned against the counter, cupping his mug, and smiled. "Why are you making it sound like theft? That account is under my name. I've been managing it for years. It's family money, sweetheart, not your personal piggy bank." I felt heat rise in my chest, a stinging pressure behind my eyes. "Family money? That's my fund. Mom told me." He cut me off smoothly, like a knife sliding through butter. "Your mom trusts me to keep things in order. And frankly, you don't really know how money works yet. College kids always blow through cash without realizing. I'm making sure nothing gets wasted." His tone, that condescension, as if I were some spoiled child asking for a new toy instead of trying to defend the only chance I had at an education. The words lodged in my throat, and before I could fire back, he poured it on thicker. "You've been spending too much time stressed about these applications. It's messing with your memory. Believe me, you think you saw 12 grand gone? You didn't. The balance was never as high as you're imagining. You're conflating. Stress does this to people. Gaslighting. That's what it was. Even if in that moment the weight of his certainty almost made me question myself. Was I wrong? Did I exaggerate it in my head? For a split second, the ground under me tilted. But I had the alert. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't. Still, the way he said it, so calm, like a father instructing a child who had dreamed up monsters in a closet, made me fold into myself. If my mom had walked in right then, she would have seen exactly what he wanted. Me looking unstable, and him, the patient guide. I walked back to my room with my chest on fire, my phone gripped as if it were my last weapon. I couldn't shake the thought. If he could twist something so obvious into a misremembering, how many times before had he done this, and I let it slide? But the very next evening, he crossed a line no audience could ignore. Because this time, he said it in public, and everyone heard. Shall I write the next chapter? The following night, the entire school community gathered in the cafeteria for Scholarship Recognition Night. It was meant to celebrate students with promising applications, to announce local awards, and introduce families who had applied for community-based scholarships. I'd been looking forward to it for months, hoping to stand with my classmates, to be seen for my work instead of always shadowed by Mark's presence. But the second we walked in, I felt that gnawing dread return. Mark was unusually animated, explaining loudly to other parents how tough it had been to juggle finances for my education. He made it sound noble, like a war he alone had waged, while I stood right there trying not to boil over. When the principal invited parent speakers up to share advice about the college process, Mark practically leapt at the opportunity. Before I could react, he was already at the microphone, holding it like he'd rehearsed this moment. I just want to remind everyone, he began, his voice deep and falsely steady. College is a huge responsibility, not just for kids but for families. In our case, he gestured towards me, making my stomach churn. We've had to make sacrifices, serious sacrifices. Our house, our savings, even her college account has had to be restructured because times are hard, and I hope the community understands the lengths we've gone to keep her dream alive. The room let out soft murmurs of sympathy. Heads nodded in admiration. Parents actually clapped. Meanwhile, inside me, something was breaking. Restructured? That was his word for, I drained it to cover my debts? He was parading me as some tragic figure he was single-handedly rescuing, while the truth sat locked in my phone, vibrating like a hot coal in my pocket. My teeth clenched so hard my jaw hurt. He spoke as though I were his charity project, a storyline designed to emphasize his heroics. Teachers leaned toward him with sympathetic smiles, while other students glanced at me with pity I did not ask for. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout the truth across the cafeteria, but my mom sat beaming beside me, soaking up the glow of his kindness. She believed every word, and all I could do was swallow my rage as it curdled into a sharp ball of shame in my chest. By the time he returned to sit next to her, all I could hear was the applause still echoing in my ears. He put his arm around her shoulders, leaning back with smug satisfaction. To everyone else, he looked like the strongest man in the room. To me, he was a thief who had just stolen not only my money, but my dignity too. But a part of me decided right then, this couldn't stand. He thought public humiliation would silence me, but in truth, it planted something deeper inside me, a desperate need to prove, in front of witnesses, what he was really doing behind closed doors. I knew then that my next step had to be practical. I couldn't just rage. I needed a plan to fix this, before he buried me completely. Shall I write the next chapter? The next morning, my head was pounding like I'd been screaming in my sleep. My phone still displayed the alert from the bank, the cold digital reminder that I wasn't imagining last night's rage. I had convinced myself if I just involved my mother directly, if I put the facts in front of her with him in the room, she'd finally see through the carefully groomed image he performed for everyone else. So I came up with what I thought was the perfect plan. I called my mom while she was on her lunch break and said, "Can we go together to the bank after school? I need to make sure all my FAFSA paperwork matches what's in the account. It'll be easier if we're all there. I said all on purpose, meaning her, me, and Mark, because I didn't want him to accuse me later of sneaking around. He had a way of making even logical decisions sound like betrayals if he wasn't in the loop. Mom agreed easily, her voice full of energy. Of course, honey. Better safe than sorry. That afternoon, I walked into the bank with a folder of application forms clutched in my arms. My chest ached with nerves, but for once, I felt confident. At least it would be out in the open. At least I'd have a banker confirm the account activity in front of my mom, something Mark couldn't gaslight. But when we sat down with the bank manager, and I asked, as politely as possible, to see the current college fund balance, the woman blinked at me, then peered down at her computer. After a few clicks, her expression shifted into that customer service smile people wear when they're trying to hide discomfort. I'm afraid we can't disclose accounts not held in your name, she said gently. I blinked. Not held in my name? That's my education fund. Oh, sweetheart, Mark cut in smoothly, resting a hand on my shoulder. You must be misunderstanding. You're listed only as the beneficiary. I'm the account holder. Legally, it's under my management until... He made a vague gesture with his hand. Well, until certain conditions. Certain conditions? My pulse thudded in my ears. He was acting like this was always the plan, like I should have known I'd never be able to access it directly. I whipped my head toward my mom, desperate for her to intervene, but she looked awkwardly between the banker and him. I thought she was on the account, she murmured, almost apologetically. No, that would have complicated paperwork, he said decisively, voice steeped with authority. She's still technically a minor in these setups. I'm protecting her. Protecting me? My jaw clenched so hard I felt my teeth grind. Every word was a wall slamming shut. Instead of clarity, I was painted as naive. Instead of justice, I was left silent in a sterile office with Mark's version of reality controlling the conversation. By the time we left the bank, I was shaking so badly I could barely walk in a straight line. Mom squeezed my arm, whispering, "Don't worry, it's still yours in spirit. He's just being cautious." But her words only confirmed the nightmare. I had no access, no control. Nothing was officially mine. He'd stolen not just my savings, but also my ability to even prove it. I realized then the fix hadn't just failed. It had handed him the perfect stage to tighten his chains. That night, in my room, I stared at my folder of documents, heart hammering. If the bank system wouldn't protect me, then I needed something stronger. Proof. Evidence. Something he couldn't talk away. And one careless mistake of his would hand it to me. Shall I write the next chapter? It happened 2 days later, almost by accident. I was sitting at the dining room table after school, trying to calm the chaos in my head by methodically filling out another application form. The house was quiet. Mom hadn't come home yet, and Mark was in his usual corner chair, pretending to balance work calls while scrolling on his laptop. He always angled the screen away from me, as if even the glow of his browser was a state secret. But then he stepped out to take a call in the backyard, leaving the laptop half open on the table. I swear I didn't mean to snoop at first. My eyes just drifted, searching for something to anchor them other than the numbness inside me. That's when I noticed the email header sitting bold at the top of the inbox. Payment confirmation. Golden River Casino. I froze. Casino? For a long moment, I just stared, my body refusing to move, as if touching the keyboard would make my entire chest explode. But a different kind of heat spread through me, a hot clarity that this was my chance. My fingers shook as I dragged the trackpad, opening the email before I could stop myself. The amount hit me like a fist. $6,400 wired directly from the education savings account. The subject line wasn't vague at all. It spelled it out plainly. Funds applied to balance. The world tilted. Suddenly, I didn't need a bank manager or his smug explanations. I had proof. The money wasn't being restructured. It was covering gambling debts. And there was more. A quick scan of his inbox unearthed at least 3 more similar confirmations in the past few months. Car payments, credit card bills, even a furniture store chain, all drawn from the same account, my account. I snapped screenshots so fast my hands blurred, forwarding them to my own email before daring to breathe again. By the time Mark came back inside, I was staring blankly at my college folder like I'd been lost in thought. My heart pounded so loudly, I was terrified he'd hear it when he sat down not 2 feet away. He greeted me with that same serene smirk, totally unaware his little fortress had just sprung a hole. And for the first time, I wasn't shrinking under it. I was seeing him clearly. A man wasting away other people's futures, while basking in applause as if he were a savior. That night, lying in the dark, I stared at the secret proofs hidden in my inbox, whispering to myself like a mantra. He can't talk his way out of this. He can't spin this one. I finally have him. But the next morning, another question burned hotter than my relief. When to use it? Timing mattered. If I moved too soon, he'd bury me in excuses and drag my mom into his corner again. If I waited too long, college deadlines would pass, and the money would be gone forever. I knew I was standing on the edge of a choice that could change everything. Was I ready to risk blowing open my mother's world just to save mine? That was the breaking point. No more stalling. Shall I write the next chapter? After staring at those screenshots all night, my decision finally crystallized. I couldn't let him keep steering my mother's view of reality, while my future bled out in real numbers on his debts. The breaking point wasn't just the money anymore. It was the silence gnawing at me every time I let him perform his perfect partner act, while I sat invisible, teeth clenched. This wasn't about whether I'd go to college or not. It was about whether he could keep owning my life as if I were an accessory in his narrative. The next morning, I barely touched breakfast. Mark sipped his coffee, scrolling on his phone with the relaxed posture of a man who believed he was untouchable. My mom bustled around, humming as she packed her bag for work, oblivious. I kept imagining how her face would collapse when she saw the first casino statement. I kept trying to predict what she would say, if she'd fight for me, or if she'd accuse me of planting evidence like he surely would. I carried the weight of those questions all day, shoving cafeteria food around and staring out windows during class. By the time the final bell rang, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the electricity of resolve. I had the screenshots. I had the truth. All that was left was the moment to wield it. That night, I deliberately chose the kitchen table for my battleground. It mattered that this confrontation happened in the center of our house, in plain view beneath the same light where he'd performed his lectures about responsibility. Mom was washing dishes, and Mark was leafing lazily through the mail when I set my phone on the table. "I need to show you something," I said, staring straight at my mother. Mark looked up, his smirk already curling like he expected teenage drama. But then, I clicked open the first screenshot, the casino payment receipt glowing in the dim kitchen, and slid it across the table with my screen facing her. Her humming stopped instantly. The water kept running from the faucet as she froze, staring at the number. Mark was quick. "What's this supposed to be? Fabricated junk? Kids know how to Photoshop anything these days." His voice was calm as ever, smooth and dismissive, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. The first crack. I swiped again. Another screenshot. Car payments. Another. Credit card balance. My voice didn't shake this time. This is where the college fund went. The water finally shut off. Mom turned slowly, wiping her wet hands on a towel without looking away from my phone. "Mark?" she asked, her voice sharp in a way I hadn't heard in years. He shifted in his chair, chuckling nervously. "Sweetheart, don't let her get in your head. She's trying to wedge herself between us with misunderstandings. None of that's what it looks like." But I leaned forward with the coup de grace, the one statement that had his name tied directly to the account transfer at the casino. "Then explain this." My voice had steel I didn't know I owned. A silence hung in the air so heavy, I swear the refrigerator hum grew louder. My mom's expression hardened, her lips tightening as anger flushed across her face. For the first time, she didn't look at me like I was being difficult. She looked at him like he was a stranger. And I realized the confrontation had only just begun, because presenting truth in our house was never the end. It was the beginning of an unraveling. Shall I write the next chapter? The silence shattered in an instant. Mark pushed back from the table with a loud scrape of his chair, his hands raised as though we had ambushed him. "This is insane," he snapped, his voice sharper now, no trace of the calm savior act he wore in public. 12 years I've been doing everything for this family, and this is the thanks I get. Some snotty teenager digging through my private emails to make me look like a criminal? My mother blinked, stunned, gripping the countertop like she needed it to hold her up. "Mark," she whispered, "is it true? Did you use her fund to gamble?" "Gamble?" He barked out a bitter laugh. "You think I'm stupid enough to throw money at slot machines? Those statements are misleading. It's called investment. It's called managing risk. I don't expect her to understand that. She's just a kid. But you, of all people," he jabbed a finger toward my mom, "you've seen how much I sacrifice. You know I wouldn't do anything to hurt her future." But I could see her unraveling. She looked back at my phone, where the casino confirmation glared like a wound. Her lips pressed thin, then trembled. "It says casino, Mark." He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice into that careful coax he always used when she was uncertain. "Sweetheart, don't let her turn you against me. She's jealous. She doesn't like that you trust me more than her. So she's digging for ways to poison you. Think about how often she's overreacted before." That was his last weapon, gaslighting me so thoroughly that I looked unstable even to my own mother. But this time I wasn't backing down. I held her gaze and forced my voice steady. "Mom, I didn't hack anything. I just opened his emails while he left his laptop open. These are real. You can ask the bank. You can print the transactions yourself." My mother closed her eyes, and I saw the muscles in her jaw tighten. For a long moment, she said nothing, and the fear that she'd side with him anyway burned my throat raw. But then she spoke, firm and cold. "Mark, give me your laptop." The words hung in the air like a crack of thunder. His face twisted, shocked that she wasn't folding. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, turning fully to face him now, the towel twisted hard in her hand. "If these payments are legitimate, I want to see them for myself. Right now." That was the first time in years I'd seen him backed into a corner where she was the one pressing. He sputtered, tried to redirect again, muttered something about privacy and not letting a kid police our finances. But her expression told me running wouldn't work. Then he snapped, "Fine. You want to see it? See it. But don't come crying to me when she drives a wedge into this family, and you realize you let her ruin everything I've built here." He stormed down the hall, slamming the bedroom door so hard our frames rattled. For minutes after, the house vibrated with silence. I expected my mom to sag, to back down, to scold me for bringing the storm into her kitchen. But she didn't. She just kept staring at the screen on my phone, breathing hard, her eyes glistening with something between rage and heartbreak. Finally, she whispered hoarsely, "We'll go to the bank, not with him, with just you and me. This ends now." I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding my breath until then. Relief mixed with terror. The truth was out, but the fallout was only beginning. The next day would bring a change in our household no one could take back. Shall I write the next chapter? The next morning was eerily quiet. No clatter of Mark making his coffee. No fake cheerful humming in the kitchen. His absence didn't feel like freedom yet. It felt like the walls of the house were holding their breath. My mom sat at the table with a folder of bills spread wide, her eyes red but dry this time. She looked older overnight, like whatever armor she had been carrying to protect her vision of him had been ripped away. "Get your things," she said, without looking up. Her voice was steady, clipped. "We're going to the bank." I pulled on my jacket with shaking hands. This time, it wasn't just me fighting anymore. She was beside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the only one questioning the man who held so much over our lives. At the bank, there was no performance, no audience for Mark to manipulate. Just us and the advisor, who, after a few verification steps, pulled up the account history. I barely breathed as the screen filled with line after line of withdrawals, thousands at a time. Casinos, furniture stores, card payments. Everything I had seen in Mark's emails was right there, stamped with date, time, and account number. My mom leaned forward, her face pale as she whispered, "He told me he was saving. He promised." The advisor's tone was formal, detached. "The account is under his name as the primary holder. Without his authorization, your daughter has no direct access." Those words made my stomach drop again. Even with her by my side now, legally, it was still all his. Mom pressed her fists against the desk. "Then I want this account shut down. Closed completely. We'll start new, with her name tied directly to it. Can I do that?" The advisor hesitated. "We'll need both parties if the account holder is not present. But," her voice softened, just slightly, "you can set up a new education account in her name today, and any new deposits can bypass him entirely." A new account wasn't the recovery I wanted, but it was a foothold. It meant that at least from this moment forward, he had no more say, no more strings. As we left the bank, the papers for the new account in hand, I could see my mother's hands trembling. She stopped on the sidewalk, looked up at the gray sky, and let out a breath that sounded like years of denial cracking apart. "Everything I thought he was doing for us," she said quietly, "was a lie. He painted himself as your protector while he was gutting your future." She turned to face me, her eyes wet again, but fierce now. I should have listened sooner. I should have questioned more, but no more. "He doesn't touch another cent. Not ever." I nodded, pressing the folder tight against my chest like armor. Relief rippled through me, but fear still clawed underneath. Mark wasn't the type to accept being cut out quietly. He would fight, manipulate, retaliate. And I was about to find out exactly how ugly he could get when faced with the walls closing in. Shall I write the next chapter? When we walked back into the house that afternoon, the air was so charged, it felt like a storm had passed through. Mark was waiting in the living room, leaning back on the couch like he owned the air itself. His arms were crossed, one ankle resting on his knee, the posture of someone who thought he was still in command. "So," he said slowly, eyes flicking to the folder in my arms, "you finally dragged her into your paranoia, huh?" His voice dripped with sarcasm, but beneath it, I caught the strain, anger vibrating in the pauses between his words. Mom didn't hesitate. She set her purse down and looked him square in the eye. "We went to the bank, Mark. We saw everything. The gambling, the car payments, the credit cards." For the first time, I watched his mask falter. Just a twitch, but enough. He leaned forward, his voice rising. "You don't get it. I was covering us. That account was never just hers. It was ours. Do you think money grows on trees? You think I wanted to throw thousands at bills? I did what I had to keep this house afloat." My mother's voice cracked, but she held firm. You had no right to steal from her future. That money wasn't yours to touch. He slammed a hand against the coffee table, making me flinch. Without me, you'd have nothing, both of you. I've been carrying this family on my back, while she mouths off about colleges she'll never afford. And how do you thank me? You dig through my inbox like a thief. His eyes turned sharp on me. You've poisoned her against me, all because you can't stand not being in control. I forced myself to meet his stare, though my heart pounded so hard I thought it might tear through my shirt. You don't get to call it control when it was my life you were gambling away. The room went still. His nostrils flared, his jaw clenched, and for a split second I feared he might lunge. But my mom stepped between us, her shoulders squared like armor. "No more," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Not one more word about this being our fault. You've spent years convincing me I was lucky to have you, that my daughter depended on you. But I see it now. You've been bleeding us dry and smiling while you did it. Pack your things. You're done here." He laughed bitterly, disbelief flashing across his face like he'd misheard her. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" she snapped. For a moment, his whole body quivered with rage, as if he was about to unleash every cruel word in his arsenal. But then that cold, smirking calm drained over him again. "Fine," he said flatly, standing with sudden precision. "If I leave, don't crawl back when bills pile up, when college letters come with costs you can't pay. I'm the only reason you two have made it this far." He grabbed his jacket, his steps deliberate, and slammed the front door so hard the walls rattled. The second he was gone, my knees buckled, and I collapsed into a chair, shaking. My mom sank down across from me, covering her face with her hands. The silence roared. His absence was both a relief and a threat hanging in the air. We both knew it wasn't over. He would come back somehow to try to reclaim power. But for the first time, we had stood together, and he had fled. The real test, though, would be living with the financial crater he had left behind. The fallout was only beginning. Shall I write the next chapter? The days after Mark stormed out blurred into a strange mix of relief and dread. The house felt bigger, airier, like it had been unshackled. But every creak at night made me wonder if his key would turn in the lock again. My mom and I hardly spoke at first, both of us lost in the weight of what had happened, of what was left. And what was left was grim. The next week, envelopes started arriving. Overdue statements, interest charges, collection letters. Mark hadn't just stolen from my college fund. He had been using all the household finances like a personal casino credit line, rotating debts and hiding gaps in the budget with lies. There were utility bills I didn't know he'd let fall behind, credit accounts in Mom's name she swore she never opened, and one letter that made my chest collapse. Insufficient funds to process education account withdrawal. Mom stared at that one the longest, her fingers trembling. "He bled it dry," she whispered. I felt the walls closing in again. College application deadlines were ticking closer, and every acceptance fee, every housing deposit, felt like a mountain we couldn't climb. He had gambled away not just money, but time. Time we couldn't buy back. And then came the final blow. A letter from the bank, addressed to both him and my mother, regarding joint authorization on the original account. Even though he was gone from the house, his name was still tied legally to the funds, which meant until he willingly signed off, or until months of legal disputes dragged through court, he had leverage over every cent left. That night, my mom sat at the dining table with her head in her hands, bills spread like open wounds across the surface. When I dared whisper, "What if I can't go to college?" I didn't recognize the sound of my own voice. It cracked like a child's. She looked up at me with eyes swollen from tears. but her face was harder than I'd seen it in years. Listen to me. He may have taken money, but he doesn't get to take your future. We'll fight. If I have to pick up more shifts, if I have to beg from relatives, if we have to sell half this house, we'll get you there. Hearing her say it should have sparked hope, but all I felt was exhaustion. For the first time, I realized the full scale of damage Mark had left wasn't just about numbers on paper. It was about the way he'd built his control into the structure of our lives, so that even when he was gone, his shadow stretched across every decision we made. But in me, something else was building too. Anger hardened into resolve. I wasn't just going to let him vanish and leave us in ruins. He wanted to keep his dignity, to walk around town as if he were still the protector, the provider, the savior. That night, I whispered to myself, staring at the glowing screenshots still safe in my inbox. No, everyone will know what he did. He doesn't get to just walk away clean. The confrontation had stripped his mask at home, but I realized what came next would strip it in the one place he cared about even more, the public eye. Shall I write the next chapter?